Well, hello and welcome to the channel. I'm glad you can join me for this continuation of our UH-1D Huey Gunship. This will be part 5 of our Huey build. And in the previous video, we finished with the putting the engine and the transmission into place. So we're going to be working on the fuselage now. So in part 4, we did assemble the engine to the crew compartment area. So starting with step 5, they want us to go ahead and put the windows in. There's also this attachment piece for the hook for lifting our door glass and installing the doors. And then there are these small pieces on the top of the fuselage. I think they're air intakes, air vents, as well as these brackets that hold our doors into place. We're going to need those. We will assemble the crew area inside the fuselage. We don't want to forget our tail rotor pin. Now we're going to leave the skids off because we got a lot of body work to do and sanding and filling, so that'll be much later. In fact, we'll leave most of that little stuff off. We just don't want to be knocking it off and breaking anything more than I normally do before we get to getting all the body work finished up on it. Now this part right here that goes in above the engine, it has part of the air intake for the engine, and it also has the attachment point for our engine access panels. We'll fit that piece. And we may attach it to one side of one of the fuselages. Yeah, so that's an important piece right there. And then back over, let's see, where are we at? Here we go. And this piece right here for our lifting hook, we're going to go ahead and attach those to the fuselage. So the first thing I'm going to do is to temporarily put our fuselage halves together here. And I'm just going to use rubber bands to do that, hold it together. We can go ahead and start to fit the two major pieces, the tail hook, no, the lifting hook piece. Here we go. That's that one right there. It'll only go in one way, and I have filled some ejector pin marks on it. So we just want to check the fit first. And remember, with these older kits, well, with any kit really, just make sure that you test fit everything. So I'm going to be using this thick Tamiya cement, and we're just going to put it on the one fuselage half right there. This thick cement gives us plenty of grip and power. And it's not going to run over and glue our fuselage halves together before we're ready to actually join it. So with that in place, we'll let that set up a little bit. And since we got to take these fuselage halves apart again, we just want to make sure that that's nice and firm and we're not going to be knocking it out of there. So next, we did have a little fit issue with this grill section. As you can see here, I have added a little bitty piece of styrene, and this is 0.5 millimeter thick. So that's going to take up some extra space so that it pushes that grill up into place right where it's supposed to be. That way it'll fit correctly, and it will hopefully be flush on both sides of the engine cowling area. Is that cowling? Not sure. Fairing. Probably better to call it fairing. But we want both sides of that to be right up to the top there. So now we're going to work on these clear parts. And I know a lot of people are going to cringe because I've got my fingers all over it. But that's okay. We're going to clean all that up with a real soft cloth. We do need to cut them away from the sprues and clean up any little flashing. And this being an older kit, it does have just a little bit of flashing on the edges of the clear parts. And that's pretty easily taken care of if we use a really fine sanding stick. We just want to be sure that we're not scraping across the visual area portion where we're supposed to be able to see through it. But we are going to have to clean these up just a little bit. Now, they do seem to fit pretty good. I am kind of surprised. So we will continue on with the rest of our clear parts. Now, this is one of the major pieces that you can see. Well, shouldn't drop it, but next up is the windshield area or windscreen, and they too they do fit. But yeah, I am fumble fingers too. See, you guys aren't the only ones that drop stuff. But they do fit pretty decent. Just a little bit of sanding on the edges and taking care of these corners a little bit to get them to fit into the frames. And that's going to work pretty good for us. And as you can see here, I don't think they're going to be an issue. Now, we're not going to attach any of these clear parts until after painting, because the greatest majority of them go on from the outside, or the ones that go in from the inside on, say, the doors. That's easy to do. So there's only really two pieces that we're going to have to reach in from the inside to put in. Another major clear piece that we got here is in the nose section. So we do want to make sure that these fit as well as possible. The corners on these clear parts are kind of sharp, so we will buff that down so that they will set in just the way they're supposed to. And as you can see here, after cleaning up those corners and getting them to fit, they actually look pretty good. So I'm kind of stoked about that. So once we get all these clear parts cut away from our sprues, what are we going to do with them? Well, we need to protect them, and we need to kind of keep them in order and pretty much segregated from the left side and the right side. So what I'm doing here is just making a sticky loop with some painter's tape. This is the purple stuff, and just putting it on a piece of cardboard. And then we can just lightly attach all of our clear parts to it, and that'll keep these parts organized for us until we're actually ready for them. So I am going to mark them. This will be for the right side, and we will go ahead and set up another card for the left side. And hopefully this will keep us from losing stuff and keep everything protected for us and out of the way. So it's always good to be as organized as you can be. So these doors, yeah, they did have quite a few ejector pin marks on them, which I filled, and we're just buffing those off right now, giving them a final buff, and they shouldn't show up when we get our paint on. And it's the same thing with the inside of our sliding doors here for the troop area. They are really, really shallow, large ejector pin marks, which you can scrape the edges down, and then we can just buff them out with a real fine buffing stick. And then we're just going to remove any little edges or from the molds. Now I'm also going to pay attention right here underneath the exhaust exit for our engine. Now keep in mind we only have these fuselage halves rubber band together, but we can do the majority of this cleanup here. There was like a really large sprue gate right there, so we'll just take care of most of that, and that way that should be a little bit easier, and hopefully we won't be able to, or it will enable us, I should say, to not damage the paint on our engine when we have to do our finish work here and clean that up. So next we need to actually install these doors. I wish we would be able to paint them separately, and then install them. But those retainer brackets that go on the inside would be near impossible to get in place correctly, I think, with the interior installed and the fuselage joint. So we're going to have to go ahead and do that now. And so we're going to put those little retainers in place. And it has 2 locating pins. And don't worry about mixing up the left side and the right side for those retainers, because the distance between the holes are different from the left side to the right side. And so I just use a little bit of to me extra thin on them and press them into place there. I'm just using my X-Acto knife to do that until that glue takes hold. And once that extra thin takes hold, we'll be in good shape. And our doors are supposed to work, and it looks like they're going to be fine. Might be a little bit tricky to paint, but that's much easier than trying to put those on later. Now there are some gaps around the top corners. I'm not sure what I want to do about that. So I have decided to go ahead and glue in the that top brace and air intake for our engine. So very similar to what we did with the mounting point for the hook on the bottom of the fuselage. We're just going to glue that to one fuselage half, and then I'll just put the fuselage back together, and that'll ensure that we've got proper alignment for it. And I'll let that glue set up for us, and that way we know that it's going to be there in place right where we want it to be. And we'll just go back and use the same rubber band method that we've used before to hold this thing together. Who knows, when I get done with this thing, it might be a bunch of rubber bands around it. We'll just paint over the rubber bands. Of course, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. This is just going to hold this together for us until that piece has plenty of time to set up, and we won't be knocking things off there. So I'm also going to use a clamp here just to make sure that that center support that holds our engine access covers is centered up right where it's supposed to, and I've got it pushed completely down into its socket there. Now once that has set up, we can go ahead and split these halves in two again. So we'll take our rubber bands off and separate our halves. Now we're ready to go ahead and paint up the inside of our fuselage. We need to pay special attention to our engine area and of course our crew compartment area as well. Now I am taking and masking off and protecting from overspray the engine area, and especially those door slides that are molded into the fuselage itself. We don't want to get any overspray on that because we're going to paint the crew area a different color. So we do need to mask off where we want the black to remain. And I also put a little bit of mask tape there right on the door seals to give us continuity with the floor segment that's in the crew area too. And we'll just secure that so that we don't get any overspray in there. So that's after everything's been painted black. Next up, we're going to use the same pale gray that we used in our nose structure. So we've painted the doors, of course, and up inside the nose area of the aircraft, and right there on the side where those cutouts are for the windows. Here we're just going to remove that mask tape from the door seal area for both our driver and our pilot and our co-pilot, and we're just removing that mask out of the way there. And I think that's going to look pretty good. I wanted to use that pale gray because that kind of keeps the same theme for everything on the inside. If you remember, when we painted up the interior, we dry brushed all that insulation area and sound deadening material with the same pale gray. So we had a little accident. I went to slide the crew area in and broke off one of our control linkages. The problem is, and of course there is a problem, this piece is too thick right here where the engine fits. Right where the transmission with the controls for our rotors come. So I'm going to take and remove some of that material. I'm going to thin it out a little bit with a Dremel at first. Of course, I can't get too close down inside there. So the next thing I'm going to have to do is I'll have to use a file and finish it off to clean that up real good. And there we go. We've got it all thinned out where it doesn't knock out our controls anymore. So before we start to glue this together, we have to have a really good clean surface for the Tamiya Extra Thin to adhere and kind of melt these parts together. So I'm just using a Q-tip here, or a cotton bud, and some rubbing alcohol, and that will remove your acrylic paint. And since we used Vallejo and craft water-based acrylic paints on this, it comes off really easy. As you can see here, it's just going to clean up that contact surface area so that we get a good glue point. We don't want to have to keep those rubber bands on forever. So we'll just clean up all of that so that we make sure that we've got really good adhesion there. So with our parts cleaned up, ready for glue up, we don't want to forget to put our tail rotor pin in. And it just fits into the hole there. So I don't want it falling out and losing it, so I'm just going to take a little bit of piece of painter's mask here and just tape that into place so that while we're fitting our fuselage together, it doesn't fall out. Now with that done, we can permanently insert our crew area along with our engine, and we're just going to slide it into place. Now these parts fit really tight, so it has really positive slots for it to fit into, and I don't think it's going to be an issue, so I'm not even going to bother to actually glue it in. So with it sandwiched in between the fuselage halves, it's not going to move around on us. So we just have to very carefully get everything lined up, which is kind of tricky on this kit. There are alignment pins, 2 of them, right above the crew area here, one right there where my fingers are, and there we go. Just kind of get those to snap together. And we're just going to press everything into place. And now it's time to go back to our rubber bands. Yep, you knew you was going to see them again. And this is just going to hold everything together for us. And I am going to loop them around the doors there to keep those from flying open. I have used a little bit of painter's tape, mask tape there to hold those doors into place so they're not out there flapping in the wind. So we don't want to break those off. That would give us something else that we would have to fix, and we definitely have plenty of that left to do anyway. So we just want to secure everything so that we can start our glue process. So I need to draw all these seams together, and these modeling clamps work pretty good. And once it's together, we can just start to run our Tamiya Extra Thin down that seam. Now I'm going to be very careful not to put the glue where the rubber bands are. Okay, we don't want to start those rubber bands to dissolve, and possibly break on us or stick to the model, because that would be extra cleanup, and we don't want to do that. So here you can see I used some self-gripping tweezers to kind of align this area right here of the fairing for our transmission section while it was drying with the glue. So up to this point, we've only glued up the bottom and the top section of the crew area. We're saving the tail section here for last. And one of the mistakes I used to make growing up, building models, is I like to put glue all the way around the edge and then try to join everything at the same time. And that is just a really big mistake, especially on these old kits. Well, really any kit. You need to really do your seams in sections. Here I can check and see what the fit is. And with pressure on it from the clamps, they not only close up that seam, but with a little bit of pressure on it, we can actually flex those two fuselage halves together and get the best seam possible. So here we're just going to start the bottom, and we're going to glue that up first. Now, when it comes to the top area here, it's not quite as good of a fit. And you can probably see I can press on it and kind of get that seam to line up pretty good. So with the pressure from the clamps, we're going to be able to fix that. So these clamps actually have a V-notch in them, which we're just going to place that right over top of the glue seam, and that will pull it together and also allow us to adjust the height from the left side to the right side a little bit by slipping the clamp one way or the other. And that'll help get it as close as possible to being even. I have no doubt that we've got some cleanup that we've got to do here in this area, but we just want to make sure that we get a good glue area, plenty of contact for the To Me Extra Thin to work. And once we get that glued up satisfactorily, we'll just go ahead and run our To Me Extra Thin right on down that seam. Now we don't have to be too careful with it because extra thin dries, well, really thin. And we're going to do a lot of sanding here on this particular part. It is, of course, as a rule of thumb, always a good idea to be as neat as possible. And if you watch when you use To Me Extra Thin, it will actually wick down into that seam, and you can just keep going over it until it's taken all the glue it wants. So with the main portion of the tail done, I'm just going to use these clothespins here, wooden clothespins, to hold the vertical section of the tail stabilizer together. You want to be careful not to use too strong of a spring clamp, because since these parts are hollow beneath, you can over clamp, and that'll actually cause the gap between your parts to spread open. So you just need just enough force to hold it together. And then just glue it up. We're just going to be really careful not to put too much around that hub area where our tail rotor pin is, because we would like for that to still be able to move. Okay, so here you can see I've just set it on top of the skids. I haven't glued those to the fuselage. We're not going to do that for a little bit. That'll probably be in the next video. We've managed to fix a few little problems and get our clear parts fitted and, you know, make a few adjustments here and there. But it's starting to look like a helicopter, I think. And I'm sure glad you guys have tuned in for this part. In our next part, we'll be working on all the little body work and the seams and our engine covers. Well, there's just so much to do. And you're not going to want to miss that. So if you're new to the channel, and you're not a subscriber, I hope that I earned your subscription today. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss our next installment on our Huey build here. And for all of my subscribers, special thanks to you guys. It's because of you that I keep making these little videos for you to enjoy. So if you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to hit the like button. And until next time, guys, I'll see you in the next one.